Radio 4 on music. Re-releasing the best of the BBC Radio 4 music archive.
New Orleans pianist Jelly Roll Morton often claimed to have invented jazz in the year 1902. While the jury's still out on that one, he does have some claim to the first jazz composition ever published, and he also recorded some very early jazz classics with his band the Red Hot Peppers in the mid-1920s. By 1938, Morton was running a bar in New York. He'd failed to make much money out of his compositions or to find musicians interested in what was already seen as an outdated style of jazz. When broadcaster and jazz enthusiast Alistair Cook came across Morton there, he likened it to meeting the president at a shoeshine parlour. Realising Morton had first-hand knowledge of the early days of jazz, Cook persuaded the folklorist Alan Lomax to record him at the Library of Congress. Though initially sceptical, Lomax was transfixed by Morton's songs and by stories of pool hall hustlers, gamblers and murderers taken from his teenage years playing piano in a New Orleans brothel. Lomax ended up recording with the pianist every day for a month. It's these recordings, which contain language which may offend, that make up this edition of BBC Radio 4's Archive Hour. Historian Marybeth Hamilton explains how, for years, their explicit, violent and misogynistic content meant they lay untouched and mostly unheard in the archive. I'm John Wilson with Radio 4 on Music, and this is the dream time of jazz.
It's the 12th of June 1938, a hot afternoon in Washington, D.C., and Jelly Roll Morton is sitting at the piano in the Coolidge Auditorium at the Library of Congress. For the last 4 weeks, he's been there almost daily, performing for a recording machine operated by the head of the library's archive of folk song, Alan Lomax. Lomax has brought him to the library in order to document his life story. He's especially interested in songs and tales that Morton remembers from around 1900, when, as a composer and pianist in dance halls and honky-tonks, he helped to create jazz in New Orleans. Morton has been happy to cooperate, delighted, in fact, to have a listening ear, but there's a particular song Lomax is after, and so far he's not gotten Morton to sing it without in some way censoring the lyrics. But today, at last, he succeeds.
Happened to be one of my first tunes in the blues line down in New Orleans in the very early days when people first started playing piano in that section. Of course, when a man played piano, the stamp was on him for life, the femininity stamp. And I didn't want that on, so of course, when I did start to playing, the songs were kind of smutty a bit. Not so smutty, but something like this. I'm the white and ball, don't deny my name. Oh, the white and ball, don't deny my name. I'm the wine and ball, don't deny my name. I can pick it up and shake it like stays and chains. I'm the wine and ball, don't deny my name. I had that gal, I had her in the grass. I had that bitch, had her in the grass. Yes, baby, I had that bitch, had her in the grass. One day she got scared and a snake ran up her big ass.
It was 1994 when I first came across Jelly Roll Morton's Library of Congress recordings. I was just beginning work on a book on the blues, and I was looking for stories about black popular music as it had sounded before 1920, when jazz and blues by African-American artists began to be sold on what were then called race records. I heard about Jelly Roll Morton's reminiscences when an independent label called Rounder Records issued selections from them as part of a 4-CD set. It included several tracks that had never been heard by anyone since Morton recorded them in 1938. Among them was the song we're hearing, Whining Boy Blues.
Nickels with a beefsteak and a dime's with the Lord, 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 Lord. Nickels with a beefsteak and a dime's with the Lord.
Though Morton claimed that Whining Boy Blues was not really all that smutty, in fact, the lyrics were ferociously filthy, so much so that 70 years after they were recorded, they still cannot be broadcast. The extracts you're hearing now are just about all we can play on the airwaves. Some other numbers, like Make Me a Pallet on the Floor and The Murder Ballad, can barely be excerpted for radio at all. Listening to them, I was astounded. Morton's recollections of the very early days of jazz were as obscene, violent, and misogynistic as anything to be found in rap or hip-hop. I wanted to know where this material had come from and how it came to be recorded under the auspices of the Library of Congress. Sitting at that piano in the Coolidge Auditorium, in the shadow of the U.S. Capitol building, Morton was effectively certified as a national treasure. But his reminiscences set out a rendition of the American past that I'd never seen in any history book.
Ready? Jelly Roll, tell us about yourself. Tell us where you were born, who your folks were, when, how. Well, I'll tell you. As I can understand, my folks were in the city of New Orleans long before the Louisiana Purchase. And all my folks came directly from the shores, or not the shores, I mean from France. But it's crossed the world and the other world. And they landed here in a new world years ago. I remember so far back as my great-grandmother and great-grandfather.
Tell us about what their names were, Jelly.
Their names, my great-grandfather's name was Émile Péché. That's a French name. And the grandmother was Mimi Péché. It seems to be all French. And as long as I can remember those folks, they never was able to speak a word in American or English.
Did they own slaves?
Oh, well, I don't know. I don't think they had no slaves back there in Louisiana. I don't think so. I don't know, but they never spoke of anything like that. But anyway, my grandmother, her name was Laura. She married a French settler in New Orleans by the name of Henry Monette. That was my grandfather. And either one of them spoke American or English. Well, my grandmother bore sons named Henry, Gus, Neville, and Nelisco, all French names. And she bore the daughters, Louise and Viola and Margaret. That was the three daughters. Louise, her elder daughter, happened to be my mother, Fred Jelly Roll Morton. Of course, I guess you wonder how the name Morton come in. By the name Morton being an English name, it wouldn't sound very much like a French name. But my real name is Ferdinand Lamont.
The musician-born Ferdinand Lamont had his beginnings in the Creole section of New Orleans. He was born sometime around 1885. His father left when he was small, and he took his stepfather's surname, Morton. Most of the men in his family were bricklayers, and he would probably have followed the family trade had he not shown talent for the piano. By his late teens, he was slipping out of the house to perform at the most lavish brothels in Storyville, the city's red light district, where black musicians were taking the raw materials of blues and ragtime and fusing them into something called jazz. He kept his work secret for as long as he could, but in time his family threw him out. It was around then that he got his nickname, which was, to put it mildly, a double entendre. Morton always worried that playing the piano would give the impression that he was a sissy. Taking a bit of sexual slang for his nickname was a way of declaring himself a ladies' man. As a pianist in Storyville, Morton was a high flyer, but from there on, his career was a series of near misses. Though his composition Jelly Roll Blues was the first jazz tune to make its way onto sheet music, he never reached the top rungs of stardom. In the 1920s, he made some recordings with his band, the Red Hot Peppers, but their appeal to black listeners soon fizzled out. The real acclaim was going to horn players like his fellow New Orleans native Louis Armstrong. Even when his songs were picked up by other musicians, Jelly Roll got virtually no credit. In 1935, Benny Goodman had turned Morton's King Porter Stomp into one of the defining hits of the swing era, but Morton himself earned not a penny in royalties. By 1938, Jelly Roll Morton was settling into the life of a has-been. He abandoned his attempts to find work on the jazz circuits and retreated to Washington, D.C., where he opened a bar called the Jungle Inn. It was a small, dingy room above a hamburger joint in the city's black district. Occasionally, he played the piano, the few times he had willing listeners. More often, he whiled away his time mixing drinks or breaking up fistfights or tossing out drunks. But though Morton had no black fans to speak of, it turned out that he had a tiny cult of white ones. Beginning in the early 1930s, his old recordings had begun to draw the attention of record collectors. These were connoisseurs of old-time jazz, music that African-American listeners had abandoned or never listened to much to begin with. They'd stumbled upon Morton in the discarded record bins in junk shops in Harlem and the south side of Chicago, where you could buy his old 78s in bulk for only 25 cents for the lot. Yet what to black listeners sounded old hat and corny, to these young white aficionados sounded like history. For them, recordings like Jelly Roll's Black Bottom Stomp were a lifeline to old New Orleans, an audio fragment of jazz's glory days. Gradually, the Jungle Inn began filling up with record collectors. Among them was a young BBC journalist, Alistair Cook. Cook was in Washington to record a radio documentary on American history, and for him, Morton was a walking, talking embodiment of it. Finding him at a dive like the Jungle Inn was, as he later put it, like meeting the president at a shoeshine parlor. He spent time with him at the keyboard, getting a few lessons in jazz technique, and he discovered that Morton had stories to tell. So he alerted a young folklorist who was helping him put together his radio documentary, a white Texan named Alan Lomax. At age 23, Alan Lomax was a passionate fan of folk music. For the past 5 years, he had devoted his life to collecting old melodies, folk blues, hillbilly ballads, field hollers, and spirituals. It was a passion that he'd inherited from his father, John Lomax. Together, they had kick-started the archive of folk song in 1933 by taking a phonograph into southern prisons and recording the bluesy laments of black convicts. Among their discoveries was a convicted murderer, Leadbelly, who they turned into America's first folk-singing celebrity.
Follow me down, follow me down, follow me down on the storm you down. They told me, he said, I'm this people's gonna be the dead dog. I told Mother, you don't know. When this sweet folk came, why don't you let me? I broke Mother's heart, and she turned around, and she started to cry. I couldn't stand to see my sugar crying. It broke my heart. And I walked away from her, and you know what she said?
What made the Lomaxes unique was their evangelical enthusiasm for recording technology. They weren't the first folklorists to use portable phonographs, but they had a visionary sense of what they could achieve. For their trek through southern prisons, they had traveled with a purpose-built machine weighing 500 pounds that could manage what, up to then, had been impossible. It could make durable, high-fidelity recordings and play them back on the spot. Impoverished singers in remote rural regions could hear the sounds of their own voices. It was a process that Alan Lomax would call cultural feedback, using the media of mass communications to empower marginal people and preserve musical traditions that otherwise seemed destined to die out.
Lord have mercy.
Alan Lomax had never shown any inclination to record jazz. It hardly needed federal help to preserve it. In the form of big band swing, it was all over the nation's airways. Jazz was the enemy that he was combating. On his song-gathering treks, he sought out singers who were free from its contamination, like Leadbelly, whose long prison confinement had, so Lomax believed, kept him away from phonograph records and the radio. Nothing in Lomax's background suggested he should have been interested in Jelly Roll Morton, but Cook and others kept insisting that Morton was a great source of old melodies. So eventually, after much prodding, Lomax invited him to the Library of Congress. Jelly Roll turned up for his first session wearing gold rings, a $100 suit, and a diamond set between his front teeth. Lomax ushered him into the Coolidge Auditorium, privately doubting whether he would end up with anything worth his while to preserve. To start things off, Lomax asked Morton to sing a traditional number, an old blues called Alabama Bound.
When I was down on the Gulf Coast in 1904, I missed going to the St. Louis Exposition to get in a piano contest, which was won by Alfred Wilson of New Orleans. I was very much disgusted because I thought I should have gone. I thought Tony Jackson was going to be there, and of course that kind of frightened me. But I knew I could have taken Alfred Wilson. So then I decided that I would travel about different little spots. Of course, I was down in Biloxi, Mississippi during the time. I used to often frequent the Flat Top, which was nothing but an old honky-tonk, where nothing but the blues were played. There was fellas around played the blues like Brocky Johnny, Skinny Head Pete, Old Florida Sam, and Tricky Sam and that bunch.
What did they play?
Why, they just played just ordinary blues, the real low-down blues, honky-tonk blues, you know.
What was the name of that?
Well, for instance, Brocky Johnny used to say, sing a tune something like this. The title was, All You Gals Better Get Out and Walk, because he's going to start his dirty talk. Yes, it was. So you happened to truck down to Mobile. At that time, I was supposed to be a very good pool player, and I could slip upon a lot of people playing pool because I played piano, and they thought I devoted all my time to the piano. So we got in Alabama bound, and the frequent saying was, any place that you was going, why, you were supposed to be bound for that place. So, in fact, we was Alabama bound. When I got there, I wrote this tune called Alabama Bound. It goes this way. I'm Alabama bound, Alabama bound. If you like me, sweet baby, you gotta leave this town. When that rooster crows, when I hadn't ran around, if you want my love, sweet babe, you got to run me down. She said, don't you leave me here. Don't leave me here. But sweet papa, if you just must go, leave a dime for beer. I said, sweet mama, babe, sweet mama, babe, if you must stay, I'll be gone for days and days.
The Alabama Bound that Morton began singing was not the number that Lomax anticipated. He'd collected a version of it a few years earlier from a black convict named Bowlegs at Parchman Prison Farm in Mississippi. Bowlegs' version had been slow and mournful and sounded as old as the cotton fields, but Morton played a much jauntier version that he claimed to have written in 1904. And while he was perfectly happy to sing the song, he was much more interested in setting the scene. The honky-tonks and the pool sharks and the low-life piano players.
If you must stay, I'll be gone for days and days. Of course, I wrote this tune while I was in Alabama, about the year of 1905, when I was about 20 years old. I was considered very good amongst my friends, that is so far as the writing period. And I've always had a kind of little inkling to write a tune at most any place that I would ever land. Of course, we had King Porter around there. That is, Porter King. The man that King Porter stomped was named after. He was considered a very good piano player. And of course, we had King. I just remember his name. I think his name Charlie King, another piano player around there. Baby Grice was another one that was supposed to be good. That was all in Mobile. Baby Grice was from Pensacola, Florida. Then we had another one around that was supposed to be very good from Florida also. His name was Frazier Davis. And Frank Rachel was supposed to be the tops when it came down around Georgia. But somehow or another, most all those boys kind of felt that I had little composing ideas and always tried to, that is, encourage me to play some numbers. That is, write a number, So that's why I wrote Alabama Bound. What you want me to do? That's the way I played for the girls and do the high kicks. Said, my, play that thing, boy. And I'd say, well, certainly do it, little old girl. That's just the way they used to act down Mobile those days, around St. Louis and Warren. Porter's a famous corner. I'll never forget, after I beat some guys playing pool, if it wasn't from one of my piano-playing friends, you'd never heard this record because the guy was going to knife me right in the back, I'm telling you. He had the knife right on me. He said that I only used the piano for a decoy, which he was right. And of course, he had it in his mind that I was kind of nice looking. Imagine that. Well, of course, he wasn't such a good-looking fellow himself. He had some awful rubber-looking lips, I'm telling you. Yes, indeed. He's kind of jealous of me, I suppose he was, anyhow. But I said, Alabama bound. Yes, Alabama bound. One of them good-looking gals told me, baby, come on and leave this town. I got put in jail. I got put in jail. There wasn't no one in town would go my bail. They had a sweet, sweet gal. They had a sweet, sweet gal. She got stuck on me and took me for her pal.
For Alan Lomax, all this was riveting. The best that he'd expected from Morton was a standard folklore interview, the sort he'd been doing by then for 5 years. You'd sit an old-time singer in front of a microphone. You'd ask them for a specific folk song, something from their community or region, and then you'd ask them for more songs of that same type. You might try and draw them out a bit about their musical background, about where they imagined these songs had come from, but you wouldn't do a lot of that because you had limited time. You were recording on a wax disc that would fill up after 4.5 minutes. The crucial thing was that you, the folklorist, were completely in control of the session. You asked the questions, you specified the music, you shaped the way the whole thing was going to go. What happened here was that Jelly Roll simply took over. He was more interested in talking than singing, and those opening moments made it apparent that he was an unparalleled raconteur. He took Lomax's request for a traditional tune and turned it into something more like a picaresque novel, full of the clink of pool cues, the laughter of prostitutes, and the rattle of loaded dice. Up to that moment, Lomax had never imagined that jazz had anything folkloric about it. It was simply a Tin Pan Alley confection clogging up the nation's airwaves. But Jelly Roll's recollections suggested something much richer. What Lomax was hearing was a low-life tale of origins, a raucous, bawdy piece of Americana. All that was intriguing enough to make him want to keep the phonograph running. So when Morton came to the end of the number, Lomax rushed up to his office, retrieved a box full of blank discs and a bottle of whiskey, and returned and set the turntable spinning. "Jelly Roll," he said, "tell us about yourself." The one obstacle Lomax faced was technological. To get the most out of Jelly Roll, he needed to allow him to keep on talking. That meant finding some way to extend the recording time of his wax platters. The solution Lomax found was to use not one disc recorder, but 2. As one disc neared its 4.5-minute capacity, he set the other turntable spinning so that Morton could speak and sing virtually without interruption. Lomax sat at his feet, maintaining eye contact, and kept the 2 phonographs hidden behind him. On that score, he needn't have bothered. Morton was not at all inhibited by the presence of the disc recorders. He had a clear sense of what he wanted to say.
Well, the girls would start. I said, "Play me something there, boy. Play me some blues." So they'd start playing in this way.
They met every day for the next 4 weeks. Occasionally a visitor slipped in to listen. Lomax's sister Bess was sometimes there, and so was Alistair Cook. Mostly, though, the auditorium was empty. Every so often Lomax asked a question, but by and large he remained silent. Jelly Roll simply closed his eyes, tilted his head back, put his hands to the keyboard, and called up his memories of the beginnings of jazz and the dives and honky-tonks of New Orleans.
I could sit right here, think 1,000 miles away. Sit right here, think 1,000 miles away. Since I had the blues this bad, cannot remember the day. Tell me, baby, what you got on your mind? Tell me, baby, what you got on your mind? I'm eating and drinking, having a lovely time. Let me be your wiggler till your wobbler comes. Let me be your wiggler till your wobbler comes. You tell your wobbler, what your wiggler done? I never believe in having one woman at a time. I never believe in having one woman at a time. I always have 6, 7, 8, or 9. She said, babe, oh baby, babe, oh baby, you better set your sweet papa crazy. Sometimes it have good-looking women of all kinds. Beautiful women. Some was ugly, very ugly. Some looked like they had lips, looked like bumpers on a boxcar. I'm telling you, they had all kind of men dressed up, rags. Rags looked like ribbons on some of them. Some of them with big guns in their bosoms. It was the law in New Orleans that anybody could carry a gun if they wanted, almost. Of course, it was just about a $10 fine, so it didn't make very much difference. And if they found you $10, why, your sentence would be 30 days in jail, and possibly they'd put you in the market to clean up the markets in the morning, and most of the prisoners would always run away.
Listening to Jelly Roll Morton now, what's most haunting is the sound of it all. Throughout the interview, he plays a dreamy, drifting set of chords on the piano, changing from major to minor key to set the mood for his tales. We hadn't agreed on that at all, Lomax later remembered. It came out of nowhere, the fact that he decided to do that. The metronomic noise you hear intermittently is his foot tapping on the floor, and sometimes he slaps his hand on the piano bench to mimic a gambler's cards hitting the table. Most spellbinding of all is his voice, a languid, hypnotic baritone that loops and slides and stretches one-syllable words into two. The whole thing is a performance. As he speaks, his voice itself becomes music, and not just when recalling particular songs, but when he casts his mind back into the low-life landscape of subterranean New Orleans. At least a third of the interview was given over to this. It was as though Morton sensed that his testimony could bring that world to life one last time. Here Morton describes some of the gangsters and card sharps he encountered in his boyhood. He's speaking to Lomax and to Lomax's sister, who stopped by to listen.
As I before said, they always had some kind of a gambling game going. And if you ever decided to try to play Koch, which is strictly a New Orleans game, the 3-card Spanish poker, you deal from the bottom of the deck. The way those guys could shove those cards at the bottom of the deck and pull them, of course, you pull your cards from the bottom of the deck to deal. Boy, they'd have a league in no time. Of course, among some of those real tough boys, there were men like Chicken Dick. Chicken Dick was a real tough guy, Wolf. Oh, he was a tough guy, real tough. Had shoulders on him and arms, well, much more stronger looking than Joe Louis. Aaron Harris, no doubt, was the toughest of them all. He was a known killer, a very dangerous character that had very little to say. I know many instances where the policemen wanted Aaron, but they couldn't afford to say very much to Aaron unless they intended to kill him. And they was afraid that if they tried, that their life would be in danger. It seemed like he never missed. Any time he got ready to kill anyone, man or woman, made no difference because he killed his sister. He'd never miss. He'd kill you when he wanted to. Tudu Parker was also a very tough guy. He was a man that you couldn't bother with, but they all respected Aaron Harris. Sheepite was the toughest guy you ever seen in the world until Aaron Harris walked up. When Aaron Harris walked up, why, he was just the same as a lamb. I knew Sheepite very well. I was raised up with him. In fact, I know all these boys very well. Of course, he was a real big-mouth, tough guy. And if he could bluff you, then he would murder you if it was necessary.
What would he say?
Oh, I couldn't afford to say the words that he would say.
Go ahead and say it.
Oh, there's a lady in the house, and I couldn't afford to say. Must I say the word like that in front of the ladies? Well, I tell you, his chief words, when they'd walk into a gambling house, everybody would start quitting. Say, cash in my check, say, I gotta go. That's how your mother, if you're gonna play. Sheepite's here, I'm the baddest son of a bitch that ever moved. And sit down there and play. If you don't, I'm taking this money. Of course, it made no difference whether he lost or won. He took the money, unless Aaron was there. Then when Aaron was there, he was very polite. Well, Toodlum was a very tough guy, too. And he was a very dangerous man to fool with. But he respected Aaron Harris, too. They all respected Aaron. Ernest Mayfield was a kid that claimed that he was here even before the Mayflower sailed. His parents. He looked very much like an Indian and claimed that all his relations were Indians. He was a dangerous man with a gun. He would shoot you in 2 minutes. Never fought anybody with his fists, and nobody cared to bother with him. Even Aaron Harris figured that he was kind of treacherous, and he may get you with your back turned because he was known to get you anytime you did anything to him at all. They had a very tough bunch of boys. No doubt there's some of them still living that frequented one of the corners where I used to sing in the quartets at Jackson and South Robertson. They called it Jackson and Locust those days. A very tough gang hung out there. The Picket Boys. There was Bus, there was Nick, there was Nonny, there was Bob, and they had another one. I don't remember his name. Well, they lived way back of town, as they call it in New Orleans, out Jackson Street.
Were these guys thieves as well as...
I really don't know how they made their living.
Were they sweetback men?
I really think that they really were sweetback men. They always had a lot of women running after them. Anyway, they were very tough. The policeman was known to never cross Claiborne Avenue, and they lived 5 blocks beyond Claiborne.
The gamblers and roustabouts Morton was describing, as well as jazz itself, came out of the Tenderloin district of New Orleans. From 1898 to 1917, the city was unique in having America's only legalized district for prostitution, which was known as Storyville. It was the swank part of the red light district, where the prostitutes and their clients were white or Creole. Black prostitutes worked in more threadbare surroundings in a neighboring area called Back of Town. There, the clubs were open until sunrise, and the musicians who worked in the Storyville brothels turned up to play after hours. Jelly Roll moved back and forth between the two neighborhoods. His gifts on the piano won him a permanent place at Hilma Burt's brothel, the most glamorous house in New Orleans. It was a world where style mattered, to men as well as women. With his diamond-studded smile and fistful of gold rings, Jelly Roll had already demonstrated he was a dandy. It wasn't surprising that he had a great memory for sartorial detail.
Mike had a burned hand, and he used to wear a kind of a stocking over it. He was seemingly simple to me. I think he was a half-wit. In fact, I'm sure that he was. He would laugh and go on, and he wanted to have some kind of an importance, and he wanted to be known as such. All those boys in New Orleans dressed very well, but they all had the real tight trousers those days. When they'd get into the trousers, why, they'd fit them like a sausage. Of course, Burtnards and Wagner's were the tailors, and they know just how they wanted those clothes, and they would fit them that way. I'm telling you, it was very, very seldom that you really could button the top button of a person's trousers. They had to leave the trousers' top buttons open. And they had the suspenders, and of course they really didn't need any suspenders because it was so tight-fitting. And it was one of the fads that they would take one suspender down as they would walk along with a walk that they had adopted from the river, which they called shooting the agate. Well, Nick would come along shooting the agate and leave his shirt open in the summertime so you could design his red flannel undershirt. That was considered a big thing with some of the real illiterate women. If you could shoot a good agate and had a nice high-class undershirt with a flannel shirt with the collar turned up, boy, I'm telling you, you'll liable to be able to get next to that broad. She liked that very much.
How did they walk when they shot the agate?
Well, of course, by not being able to walk, I can't explain it to you. But I tell you, it was a kind of a very mosey walk with holding two fingers down on one finger on each hand, the front finger next to, in other words, the index finger. Yes, like that, you know, and with the arms stiffed out, you know, especially when they would be standing. And of course, if they was dressed up and you tried to talk to them, they would find the nearest post when they have a lot of creases in their clothes, or get to a house and they'd stiffen their arm out and hold themselves so far away, just as far as their arm would let them, so they wouldn't get any their clothes soiled. They was very particular about that. Especially, especially some of them, they wore, that's right, you've got the right eye, they were that kind of a broken up stand. Especially, some of them would wear overall jumpers with a high-class pair of trousers, maybe cost them $15 or $18 or $20 during those days. And, of course, they wore the best of shoes. And not only shoes, nobody would wear a Stetson hat. Now, those days, myself, I thought I would die unless I had a hat with the emblem in it named Stetson. And I didn't rest until I got myself a Stetson hat and a pair of Edwin Clapp shoes. Of course, there was many of them that didn't wear ready-made shoes at all during those times. They wore a lot of shoes, what they call the St. Louis flats and the Chicago flats. These shoes were made with the cork soles on them and no heels and would turn up in the front. A lot of times they would have different designs in the toes of the shoes, such as gambler's designs, such as maybe a club, or a diamond, a heart, or a spade. I have heard later on that even some of them had made arrangements to have some kind of electric light bulbs in the shoes with a battery in their pocket, and when they would get around some jane or something that was kind of simple and thought they could make her, as they call making them, why, they'd press a button in their pocket and light up the little bit of bulb in the toe of the shoes. Oh, it is really the fact, and I've known it to be fact because that part has come from authentic source. But the others, I have really seen myself to know it's really original stuff. That whiskey is just lovely. Why, I used to go with Josky's sister. He had a beautiful sister, and I always had it in my mind that I wanted to marry her. And I used to sometimes go over to his house and hear him play the blues, and it would sound like this. That would be behind his sister's and mother's back. He said, see, Ryder, see what you have done. See, Ryder, see what you have done. You made me like you, now your man done come. I want a mama that's gonna be good to me. I want a mama that's gonna be good to me. I want a mama, one as sweet as can be. I want a gal that works in the white folks' yard. I want a gal works in the white folks' yard. I want a gal that works in the white folks' yard. This is a verse I used to always like. Do you see that little fly crawling up the wall? Oh, do you see that little fly climbing up the wall? She's going up there to get her ashes hauled. I got a mama, she lives right back of the jail. My, I got a sweet mama, she lives right back of the jail. She's got on a saddle.
Once again, we can't hear the whole original here. At the end of June 1938, Morton and Lomax wrapped up their interview. Lomax went back on the road with his portable recording machine. Morton returned to the Jungle Inn. 2 months later, he scuffled with a patron and was stabbed in the head and the chest. He came out of the hospital after a few days, but he never really recovered his health. Eventually, Morton gave up on Washington, D.C. and dragged himself to New York. He was hoping that his sessions with Lomax might have built up a buzz of excitement around him. And in time, he did go into the studio for an album called New Orleans Memories that brought him together with Sidney Bechet. But apart from that, he aroused little interest. Alan Lomax ran into him once, coming out of the subway, and walked with him for a while, and he saw how he doubled over in fits of coughing and had to pause every few steps to catch his breath. To his record collector acolytes, Morton spoke bitterly of his lost royalties. Sometimes he felt that even Lomax had conspired to defraud him. I spent months doing the archive, and it meant nothing to me financially, he told a friend. I wonder how Lomax thinks that I don't need money to live, just the same as anyone else. In November 1940, Jelly Roll learned that his godmother had died in Los Angeles. He thought she might have left him some jewels or some money, enough to put an end to his problems, so he chained his Cadillac to his Lincoln and began driving west. In Pennsylvania, he hit a blizzard. In a storm in Wyoming, he slid off the road. He abandoned the Cadillac on an icy highway in Idaho. In Oregon, he got the Lincoln stuck in a snowdrift and had to be pulled out by the local police. When he arrived in Los Angeles, he discovered that his godmother's belongings had all been pilfered. He died 7 months later, on the 10th of July, 1941, of asthma and heart failure. Jelly Roll had hoped that the Library of Congress recordings would make his name in a way that his music had not, but the very graphic testimony that made them so spellbinding meant that the archive of folk song did not know what to do with them. Even finding a secretary to make a transcription was entirely out of the question. Though a few heavily expurgated LPs from the sessions were eventually issued on small jazz labels, for the next 50 years the full, uncensored recordings remained buried in the library's vaults. Still, even unheard, they had an impact. As word of the Morton sessions began trickling out to record collectors, it dawned on a few of them that other pioneering jazz musicians might still be alive. Over the next decade, New Orleans was inundated by music researchers. By the late 1940s, they were able to draw on a wartime innovation, the tape recorder, which made it far easier than it had been for Lomax to record long, uninterrupted stretches of speech. Among the jazzmen they dug up were two self-proclaimed members of Buddy Bolden's band, Willie Cornish and Bunk Johnson. and some of Morton's old sidemen, Omer Simeon, Alphonse Picou, Albert Glennie, and Johnny Saint-Cyr. Out of those interviews emerged a wave of published jazz chronicles that excavated its New Orleans beginnings. In the process, they helped to generate a new form that acquired the label oral history.
This is the first blues I no doubt heard in my life. Mamie Desdoom, this was her favorite blues. She hardly could play anything else more, but she really could play this number. Of course, to get in on it, to try to learn it, I made myself the can rusher. 219 done took my baby away.
Alan Lomax once wrote that with the Morton interviews, a new way of writing history began. Watching Jelly Roll come alive at the microphone convinced him that recording machines could generate a new kind of autobiography, more democratic and more revealing than anything that relied upon print. Unlike an interviewer with pen and paper, the machine took down the frankest recollections without embarrassment. As Morton recalled his life hour after hour to a machine that did not interrupt him, songs generated stories, and stories generated songs, and he found memories that he hadn't known that he had. As Lomax put it years later, his sessions with Jelly Roll were exactly like a psychoanalytic interview, only without a couch. Jelly Roll Morton's free associations produced not solid chunks of verifiable fact, but something more poetic and haunting. It was history with music cues, the stuff of which dreams are made.
Can't give a dollar, give me a lousy dime. I want to feed that hungry man of mine.
Radio 4 on Music is uncovering the best of our music archive. For more programmes in the series, visit the Radio 4 website.
Radio 4 on Music.